Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Did I Get What I Paid For? For those of you who didn't see episodes 1 and 2, the premise is simple. I'm taking an old column I did for the Fanzine Collector Times where I reviewed graphic novels and converting it over to my backlog of DVDs. And boy did we have a treat for you this week. The reason I do so many public domain movies is that you're less likely to get a DMCA notice for something like this than you would a regular movie. Now, I don't have that many public domain movies that are actually worth watching. And I didn't want to get to The Ape with Boris Karloff right away, since, well, I just survived Bela Lugosi Meets a Broken Gorilla last month. I didn't think I could handle it. But I liked the idea of doing something with Boris Karloff. My good friend and our associate producer emeritus, Matthew Shipp, reminded me that I have the movie Dick Tracy Meets Gruesome. That stars Boris Karloff, and, at least according to the box, no gorillas. And now let's get into the history of this movie. And the character of Dick Tracy himself. For that, we have to travel back to the year 1931 and a cartoonist named Chester Gould. Gould was shopping around this newspaper comic strip called Plainclothes Tracy. See, there used to be things called newspapers, which were what people used to find out what was going on in the world before we had TV. But newspapers also had what they called funny pages. The funny pages was a section of the paper with 1 to 6 panel cartoons. Some were funny, some were adventure stories that went on for months. You just read a little bit of it every day. Sort of like a comic book. Only if you missed a day, you were kind of screwed. The editor changed Plainclothes Tracy to Dick Tracy, thinking that since Dick was a common slang term for detective, it got the point across without seeming too formal. After creating a backlog of strips sufficient in size to get the strip syndicated, Dick Tracy was launched nationwide in October of that year. It didn't take long for Dick Tracy to be a huge success. He leapt off the page and onto all sorts of merchandising. By 1934, he already had a radio serial. Radio serials were a lot like television shows without the picture. In 1937, Republic made a series of Dick Tracy movie serials. The movie serial itself is a very bizarre concept. There were these 5 to 10 minute shorts that were put on before the movie, only they ended with a cliffhanger. And the only way to find out how that story ended was to come back to the theater the next week, no matter what the movie was, to see the next part. All the Republic serials are in the public domain. If I can find them on DVD cheap, maybe I'll review them another time. When Republic collapsed, RKO Pictures picked up the Dick Tracy license in 1945. RKO had no interest in serials. They wanted Dick Tracy to be a B-reeler. Back in those days, it was quite common to get a double feature, but one of the two movies was usually pretty bad. When RKO collapsed, the new owners assumed the movie rights to Dick Tracy went back to Chester Gould and or Tribune Media. Tribune Media thought RKO's new owners still had it. The result was that no one renewed the movies and they fell into public domain. A Dick Tracy TV series from 1951 met a very similar fate. Funny, this is sort of a pattern with Dick Tracy. In 1961, UPA produced a series of Dick Tracy cartoons. UPA fell apart a few years later, and those shorts are now public domain. Part of the reason Dick Tracy went from being a cultural phenomenon to being almost forgotten has to do with the media rights. Apart from the comic strip itself, the estate of Chester Gould and Tribune Media don't really control all that much. All media rights are owned by actor Warren Beatty. He purchased them in 1985. In 1990, he released the now infamous Dick Tracy movie. It's actually considered a career killer for him. In recent years, Warren Beatty has blocked production on a Dick Tracy TV series and a back-to-basics, very noir-style Dick Tracy comic book by Brian Michael Bendis. In point of fact, very little has been done with the character of Dick Tracy outside of the comic strip since 1990. I mean, what the hell, Mr. Beatty? Let's assume I don't know anything about media rights. Let's just assume that, okay? It seems to me that if you bought the media right to a character, you would want to, I don't know, license it out to people to keep the character in the public consciousness, just so that awareness is still there. That way, you create new fans to replace the ones that are dying off. You can then use that new fan base to make TV shows, video games, comic books, just about anything you can possibly think of. But what do I know? Yes, Mr. Beatty, you're too old to play Dick Tracy now, but you could still give yourself a cameo as, I don't know, Tess Trueheart's father, or maybe one of the villains. And more importantly, you could make a whole bunch of money without actually having to do real work. It's a nice gig if you can get it. Anyway, let's talk about this movie. It starts with a bunch of nooses, and they're going to pan out to this dive bar called the Hangman's Knot. And there's Boris Karloff looking in on the piano player. He goes in asking to see his old friend. It turns out they're both crooks. Karloff just got out of prison, and he's already looking for a new gig. Melody, the piano player, says he knows a guy who's looking for some help. They go to his lab and talk to him. The guy introduces himself as X-Ray. Karloff finally gives us his name, Gruesome. Wow, just like in the title. Before X-Ray leaves, he tells Gruesome not to touch anything, and Melody goes back to his cover job, leaving Gruesome all by himself. And what does he do? He touches just about everything, including a safe which is full of this weird gas. Gruesome goes back to the Hangman's Knot. He starts acting funny and he sort of falls over and dies. Hey, wait a minute, the opening credits said starring Boris Karloff, and he dies in the first 5 minutes? What the hell? Anyway, Officer Irish McStereotype finds Gruesome in the doorway. He realizes he's going to need help to get this guy down to the morgue. After he's done with his little drop-off, he wants to go see his buddy Dick Tracy. Only he's in a meeting in his office. And who's in there but, wow, that same guy we saw at the lab. And he's complaining about potential break-ins at his pharmacy. I wonder who that could be. It turns out the Irish cop's name is Paddy. Wow, how creative. Meanwhile, down in the morgue, Gruesome wakes up. Wait a minute. Boris Karloff playing a bad guy who rises from the dead? Why does this seem so familiar? Not only is Gruesome back from the dead, but he seems kind of pissed off. Officer McStereotype and Dick Tracy head down to the morgue, only to find the medical examiner has been clubbed in the back of the head, and the body's missing. Dick Tracy doesn't have time for that noise, because while it's 3 a.m. at the morgue, it's 3 p.m. down at the bank. And Tess Trueheart is in trouble. There are these bank robbers who are using this gas that makes everyone freeze frayed. Only Tess isn't affected because she went in a phone booth to warn Dick Tracy. I have a question for screenwriters Robinson White and Eric Taylor. Since when are phone booths hermetically sealed? Because last I checked, the only way gas wouldn't get into a phone booth like that is if it were airtight. Tracy and the gang go down to the bank to interview witnesses, try to find out a little bit about the robbery, and then head back to the station. When Tracy is in the chief's office discussing the matter, a reporter shows up. He tells them what he knows, and he's going to run with the story unless they give him something better. They try to stop him because it could cause a run on the bank. He doesn't give a shit. He has a 2 a.m. deadline before the story can hit the syndicates. He'd rather go with Tracy catching bad guys, but what are you going to do? Tracy puts the two mysteries together. The corpse that wakes up, the freeze-frame gas at the bank. He decides to go to the university to meet with Dr. A. Tomic and his assistant, Professor I. M. Learned. Professor Learned tells Tracy that Dr. Tomic is missing, so they check his vault of chemicals. Learned sees something that she doesn't think belongs there, so she picks it up and tries to examine it. Tracy tries to do his subtle interrogation thing, and she gets a little freaked and drops it. Then, like an idiot, Tracy dips his hand on the floor to get a taste of the sample. What a maroon. He takes another sample of stuff, and, well, that's the end of that scene. What good crime movie would be complete without the bad guys having a post-height summit? X-Ray says their mysterious employer is happy and gives them their share. Gruesome isn't happy about it. He says, yeah, he provided the goods, I provided the plan, I implemented the plan, I get 50% or I cut out the middleman. Because Tracy wants to play his hunch about Gruesome being in on the bank robberies, they head down to the last place he was seen, the Hangman's Noose. They find Gruesome and Melody, which leads to a fight scene, and then a car chase, and then something that was very, very rare for the time, a fight scene inside of a car chase. Do you want to see what a Fast and the Furious movie would have been like in the 1940s? Do ya? Do ya? Well, tighten your suspenders and put on your beanie caps, kids. It's go time. During the car chase, Melody is injured, scarred, and deformed. You know, like most Dick Tracy villains. He's taken to a police hospital where they say he's in a coma. Poor, poor Patty. He chases Gruesome into a taxidermist shop. And yeah, we get the classic sort of Chester Gould sort of name for him too. I know that this was the 40s, but what type of taxidermist shop has lions and tigers? Well, at least there's no gorillas this time. I don't love the Great Gazoo. Tracy gets a call from Professor Learned. She says she wants to talk to him about all she knows about the case. But once he gets there and starts talking to her, she does sort of, well, the exact opposite of that. She wastes his time. Back at the villain's lair, the Big Boss and X-Ray are having a hissy fit. Gruesome says, don't worry about it, I got this. We cut to the boss man going to talk to Learned. It turns out he's her lover. And he's kidnapped Dr. Tomic. He tries to convince her not to talk to Tracy. She says she must. Wait a minute, didn't she do that like 5 minutes ago and lie to Tracy's face? Boss man can't or won't take care of things, so Gruesome takes it upon himself to off Learned. Back at police headquarters, Tracy, Patty, and Tess are trying to come up with a way to catch Gruesome and company. They get word that Melody has died. Poor Melody, I was just starting to like him. Tess says that's awful, because dead men tell no tales. But that gives Dick a plan. Step 1. Release press statement saying that Melody is alive. Step 2. Wrap his face up in bandages, pretend to be the disfigured Melody, and lay in bed, waiting for the bad guys to come. Step 3. Capture them. And it seems like a good plan, well, until Gruesome uses the gas on him. Oh yeah, and the hospital has a new security guard who just happens to have transferred over from the same hospital the bad guys are pretending they came from. He knows what their ambulances are supposed to look like. Gruesome thumps him over the head and steals another ambulance. Patty doesn't notice this and lets them drive off. I forgot to mention something. Before they left off Tracy, Boss Man found out about what Gruesome did to Learned, and he was pissed. So they got in a fight and Gruesome killed Boss Man. Now that we're back at the bad guy's lair, X-Ray is taking care of the evidence by putting it in an incinerator. That includes what he thinks is Melody's body. You know, Melody that's actually Dick Tracy. But this is Dick Tracy's movie, so the gas wears off at just the right minute for them to fight, and Dick Tracy makes quick work of them. Unfortunately, we have 5 more minutes left in this movie. We get a fight sequence between Dick Tracy and Gruesome that goes on way too long. Then all of a sudden, bang. No more Boris Karloff. Then we have what fans of TV procedurals call the button. You know, those little scenes at the end that tie all the loose ends together with some sort of joke? Yeah, everyone hates those. And now to answer that question you've all been waiting for. Did I get what I paid for? As if you couldn't guess. This is a different kind of bad than Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn Gorilla. And in a lot of ways, it should be considered a better movie. But somehow I don't like it anywhere near as much. This movie is 65 minutes long and it feels like 65 days. No, that's not right. I was born watching this movie, and by the time I was done with it, I was collecting Social Security. Dick Tracy's always been sort of a schizotopic property. The death, gunfights, and overall violence make you think that this wants to be a hard-boiled noir like Maltese Falcon. At the same time, it keeps a lot of the goofy-style names of the comic strip. Dick Tracy's perpetually virginal girlfriend is named Tess Trueheart. The scientists are named Dr. A. Tomic and Professor I. M. Learned. And the unseen taxidermist? You Stuff'em? My real problem is if it wanted to be a serious noir, it should have ditched the goofy names. If it wanted to be a Saturday matinee, it should have gone a little more over the top. It would have made it a lot more entertaining. This movie made me feel bad for Boris Karloff. It was made about 16 years after Frankenstein and maybe 10 years after the Universal Monsters stopped being a thing. He was taking whatever roles he could get. The problem is that for every Grinch Who Stole Christmas, there were about 30 Dick Tracy meets Gruesomes. Let me show you guys something. See this? See this DVD 2-pack? My friend bought it for me last year for my birthday. It cost 75 cents. There are 2 movies on it, so this one cost me 38 cents. And I know this isn't polite to say about a birthday present, but I want my money back. I'm sorry I still don't have my Patreon stuff set up. As always, I'll leave you with the trailer for next episode and the credits. See you next time.